Welcome to another edition of Aging with Grace 55 Plus. I'm your host, Dale Josie, and here is my special guest for today is John Tesh. Just an incredible personality. You know his history. You've seen him on Entertainment Tonight. He's a prodigious producer of albums, which I had no idea. We're going to get into some of that. But this morning, John wants to talk a little bit about an online course that he's doing based on the International Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry, teaching us how to play music in terms of staving or delaying the effects of dementia. With that said, John Tesh, welcome to Aging with Grace 55 Plus. How are you?
I'm good. I'm not aging with grace. I'm just aging.
With
My wife,
grace is something we all hope for,
I'm a lot
right?
like you. My wife is like, "Can you relax? Have you seen your birth date? Please relax." I just real quickly, I was buying a plane ticket the other day, and you know where they and you put in you put in your date of birth and everything, and so it had the thing where that scrolls down for your date of birth.
Yeah.
And so I pushed the button and it's going 1970, 1960. And it was like, oh my gosh. And I was wondering, for a moment, I was wondering, I wonder if they shut off everything under 1955. Yeah, that's when you know that you're aging and you have to have grace about your aging. There you go.
Oh, well said, my friend, because it's a blessing to age with grace. And we encourage everybody to do that. And obviously, you're doing that because we're going to talk a little bit about your book, too, an amazing book called Relentless. And in there, you give steps on how you've aged with grace through various reincarnations of yourself. But right now, why don't you,
Resurrections too.
what'd you say, buddy?
I said resurrections too. I know my life almost killed me, but go
That's
ahead.
exactly right. Yeah, the literal resurrection. We'll talk a little bit about that. But for right now, you you created a new online music course based on a study of dementia, published by looks like the International Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry. It fired up the creative cells. So, what is your online music course, John Tesh?
Well, it's actually a piano course. I
Uh-huh.
I grew up on Long Island, probably not far from you, and back in the day, my mom she was a retired surgical nurse and a ranked tennis player. So she was a formerly ranked tennis player. So when I was born, I had two older sisters, 11 and 10 years older than me, and they both played instruments because my mom had decided that she needed something to work on. So it was us. So at 6 years old, and we had a piano and a cello and a violin in our house,
Mm-hmm.
and so we had this upright piano, and my mom was like, "You're going to play piano," and actually had a couple of teachers in Garden City where I grew up. Who had worked at the Juilliard school. So there was a
Okay.
piano teacher and they teach differently, right? They teach back in the 50s, they teach with the ruler and they hit your knuckles if your hand position is
Oh.
wrong. Now you go to jail for that. Um, but so I played piano and trumpet, but it was that's just what everybody did in Garden
Yeah.
City back then, because the high school was really more of a performing arts school. And so I had all of that training, but it was all reading. It was all reading
Mhm.
music. And then when I got older, and I ended up in some jazz bands and things, and I met people who had never read music and never didn't know how to. And I mean, there are some very famous jazz musicians
Yes.
who do not read music and barely know music theory. And the reason is they just learned they hear. They would listen to
Mhm.
records and they would figure it out on their instrument.
Mhm.
And so, fast forward years later when I'm on stage and we still do about 18, 20 concerts a year.
Right.
And without fail, at the end of the concert, somebody will come up and sometimes it's 10 somebodies and they say, "Oh, I wish I hadn't given up on my," because for me, it's, the guy who used to read the celebrity birthdays on Entertainment Tonight is now playing piano. And they're like, "Wait, I could probably do this if I hadn't given up my piano lessons." And so I just thought, I kept answering questions, and I was answering YouTube questions. I thought, somebody said, "Why don't you just do a course on piano?" And I said, "Well, I have to make it different." And
Mhm.
so the title basically is the John Tesh Piano Method. Learn how to play piano by learning my songs.
Okay.
And so no sheet music, no music theory, and it's basically just here's how you hold your hands. Here's what the sound this note makes, and then as I'm doing this and I'm doing all the research on, it, I'm realizing that, oh my gosh, this when you play with two hands, there's all kinds of evidence out there because we do a radio show too where we talk about longevity and
Yes.
brain health, where this kind of, whether it's a ukulele and especially a piano, and even things like racket sports, by the way, which is odd. It's like badminton and tennis and also even table tennis. it crosses through the left and right brain across the hippocampus, and it can protect you against cognitive decline. And so when we started, giving the piano course away for a while to see what people thought, they were like, "Oh my gosh, I can just feel it in my brain." The same thing for my
Mm.
wife, who had never played piano before. So we realized that it was actually it was actually therapy,
Mm.
to learn how to play. And because I use my songs at first, I'm able to
Yeah.
show people how I played them on PBS where you
Yeah.
used to work. And also, because when I started out, I used a lot of white keys. So, I remember my piano teacher said, I said, "Oh, this is too hard." He goes, "Well, just change the key, play it on the white keys." And so a lot of the course is on the white keys. So just so you know.
Yeah. Well, the one point though I want to go back to, I had this thing about, didn't Michael Jackson have a song about playing keys, black and white or something like that?
Oh yeah, when there's a band called the Black Keys,
That's
so that
right. That's
yeah.
right. But you make a very interesting point, John, because when I was researching for this interview, I read where Prince did never learn to play, never learned to read music. He felt the music, and your favorite band, the Beatles, Paul McCartney, could not read or write music.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's amazing that there's something there that you
Yeah, very
feel it
true.
is what the artist said. Is that
Yeah,
kind of
well,
where you're
yeah,
coming
yeah,
from?
yeah, and I don't wanna be like the guy who's like, "No, don't learn how to read sheet music," because eventually when you learn,
Uh huh.
it opens up all kinds of things where you can just take something offline and be able to play that way. And in the
Yeah.
course, we actually offer an opportunity to see it on sheet music as well. But it's one of those things, if who is it? Martin Luther King Jr. said, you don't have to see the whole staircase.
That's right.
Just take the first step in faith. And it's a lot of what we talk about on the radio show too. Sometimes things just seem too big. I mean, when you look at a piano, it's like, oh my gosh, look at this massive thing. It's 88 keys, but it happens to be like the same seven keys or whatever, over and
Hmm.
over again.
Yeah.
It's just patterns. And so the barrier to entry a lot of times is, oh, I'm not going to have enough time. And when you say, hey, just spend 5 minutes a day,
Yeah.
there's a woman who just sent us a testimonial who said that, you know, I have to thank you because my husband was in the kitchen and all of a sudden he heard me playing, a few bars of the NBA basketball theme, which I wrote,
Yes.
and he came running out and going, "You're playing the basketball song," and she said it was like a
Round
feeling.
ball rock. Round
Yeah, yeah,
ball
it's
rock.
like a feeling of there's like a superpower feeling. She said, and that's really what it is.
Yeah.
The emotionality of being able, especially with us as seniors, is like, okay, and there are other ways to get there to brain
Sure.
health. There's
Sure.
you know there's knitting has also shown this, and also exercising in zone two, all the stuff that Peter Attia talks about in his book Outlive.
Hmm. But now in in your materials that I read, it said that you can teach someone to play the piano in 3 days, and you use a method called chunking.
Yeah,
Walk us through that, my friend.
you know. For a good bit of my life, I worked at CBS News for a while as a correspondent, and I got a call from the guys at CBS Sports saying, "Hey, we want you to come be a network sports announcer." And I said, "Listen, I can't name 4 football teams. You got the wrong. It must be another Tesh. It's not me." And they said, "No, no, no. The sports we would send you on. We've seen you do your live stuff. The sports we would send you on, nobody knows the rules to." And I said,
Yeah.
"Wow, okay, what the heck is that?" And it ended up I took the job just
Yeah.
because, it's like just, whatever, leap of
Right.
faith. And, it ended up being downhill skiing and, ski flying and gymnastics and the Tour de France bike race where I wrote a lot of music
Mm.
for that, for that as well.
Yes.
And when I got to be at that level of athletes, like whether it's Mary Lou Retton or Franz Klammer, the great downhill skier, Bart Connor, gymnast, Eric Heiden, the speed skater, some of the great track and field athletes, Edwin Moses, all of a sudden you start seeing a sameness in these people. And it is that a lot of them have the same level of physical expertise, but it's this, you've heard this before. It's the mental part of it. And I even, when I'm we have a church group every week and I talk about this as well, because it's about mixing faith with visualization. And I
Hmm.
saw this in practice. It was like in 1984, it was the World Cup downhill in Wengen, Switzerland. and Franz Klammer, the great Austrian downhiller, who was
Yeah.
really like Pele for downhill skiing. And so everybody's it's the day before the race, and everybody's practicing on these long runs on the 65 miles an hour going down the hill through the gates and all that. And Klammer makes one run, and then he walks back towards the start house and leans against the start house with his coach, and he's got his helmet on, his goggles, everything, his gloves and his poles and his skis, and he's got his eyes closed and he's going like this, and
Oh.
he's going and he's leaning and then he's leaning in like this,
Oh
and he's
no.
back like this, and then he's like that, and then he's like this. And I asked the coach, I said, "What is he doing?" And he said, "He's going through every inch of the course in his mind.
Wow.
He knows where his ski tips are going to be on gate 3. He knows what his time needs to be on gate 6. He can see himself at the finish line. He can see himself on the winner stand, not on the bronze or the silver, but he sees himself on the gold medal stand." And he won that day. And
Wow.
so I realized that visualization, and when you're and depending on what you believe, and I believe in the word of God,
Yes, I do too.
when you this is how I got, and it's a longer story, but this is how I got healed from cancer, is that if you can mix faith with being able to see yourself well, for example, if you can mix faith with being able to see yourself at the top of your game, then everything changes. And so when you talk about chunking, it basically is, okay, I can do this. I can, for somebody who's starting, I can play the piano, but I need to bite it off. And so chunking is basically taking a song that you want to learn and just learn 4 bars. And then the
Mhm.
next step is to loop it over like 4. And I provide these loops in the course, actually, so that people don't have to keep rewinding. And then the other part is neural practice, which is called slow practice. And that's the new way that athletes are now practicing, where tennis
Mm.
players, their coaches are having them play like this, and they won't even let them hit the ball. Some of these kids, they're just like this, and they're just practicing. They're practicing where their feet are, and they're practicing movements like this. And that's really what Klammer was doing, right? And so
Mm.
the combination of
Yes.
chunking, taking a piece at a time, looping, and making sure you put it in your, solidify it in your hippocampus, and then also, and it's hard to, if you know a song, it's really hard to play it slowly because
Yeah.
it processes differently in
Yeah.
your brain. And then no sheet music and no music theory to start, because you can learn it when you're forced to use another sense. You can't
Yeah.
really use sight reading. You have to
Mhm.
use your ears.
Well, John, I got two thoughts. I'm trying to figure out which one to load up first. I think I'll stick with the Olympic one because this will make sense. When you're talking about covering the Olympics, in your book, Relentless, which I encourage our listeners to purchase, absolutely an amazing memoir, you talk about visualization and how important that was at Red Rocks, your first concert, where you pushed everything in, $800,000, everything on the table. It was a PBS special, and you said that how you saw, you visualized, you knew every single instrument, everything that could happen, and it actually happened. You talk about walking out on the stage, being overwhelmed by the audience receiving you, and then the unexpected happens. So how do you respond when the unexpected things happen in life? Because this threatened the whole thing, an act of nature. Walk us through that.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, we didn't have $800,000, so we were like leveraging all kinds of thing and putting mortgages on stuff.
Yeah.
So, and the reason we actually had to put the money up was because PBS, I was not, I wasn't at the time, wasn't Yanni or Three Tenors, excuse me, or Riverdance, right?
Right.
And so PBS was, and you know how they work with the pledgeathons, right?
Yes.
It was like, well, if you make it, we'll test it, one of those things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was really. I remember a pastor friend of mine said to me, when we got through, what happened was we were all ready to go. We had rehearsed with the orchestra. We gave 7,000 tickets away because nobody who who I was as a musician. And here we are, all loaded up, ready to go. 15 cameras, and so we're 4 songs in, and it just starts to pour. One of the worst rainstorms they've
Oh,
had there. And so, uh, there's no top on the. I didn't. It wasn't then in the Red Rock stage, and so the all of the string instruments they fled because their
yes.
instruments were ruined. So we're left there with the brass guys and just my band, which is 5 people, and we just thought, well, we're done.
Right.
Shut down the cameras and everything. But the audience started stomping their feet, and they put on slickers because I guess well, it has happened before there, and they
Yeah.
had an umbrella, right? So I'm looking out at this sea of colorful umbrellas, and people are just stomping their feet, and this is a huge amphitheater with giant
Mm.
rocks on either side. You've been there,
Yes.
and that's boom,
Yeah.
boom, like, and so we're like, what are we gonna do? We just have to keep playing. So we played without the orchestra, and after every song, there was no applause because people only had one hand. The other hand was on the umbrella. So the umbrellas would go up, and my bass player leans over and goes, "Look, we're at a Mary Poppins concert." I said, "Shut up."
Well,
So
you had
we
water pouring out of your
oh,
piano. Is that
it was
true?
unbelievable. You can see it in the video. It's so crazy. And then it just supernaturally stopped, and the moon came out. You can actually see me thanking God on the stage, and we continued. And long story short, that we sent that tape to one station in Maryland, and they tested it at midnight. And I got a call the next day because I was still at Entertainment Tonight, and they said, this thing just outpledged the three tenors. So you really got something here, and you've really got something. Ended up with it playing for 4 years, and started my music career. And I was able to leave television and focus on my dream. But I remember this pastor friend of mine said to me, "You know what, John? When that rain came down, you were backing into a blessing." And what he
Oh,
really meant there was you can order your, and this is in the Bible, right?
yes, it is.
You can order your own steps,
Yeah,
but
but
God
God
has
directs
ordered your
path.
steps.
That's
So
right.
you have to. I mean, and I love underdog stories. I don't know how many times I watch Gladiator. I still
Oh,
watch it. Braveheart. I've read
yes.
Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning, The Holocaust Survivor, 4 or 5 times when I was going through a cancer journey.
Mhm.
And so we are all, on this earth with suffering and disappointment that's baked in. We're all underdogs. And if you
Yeah.
don't see yourself as an underdog, you'll never get anywhere, and you won't age gracefully, basically.
Well, on that point, you talk about your beautiful wife, Connie, who during that cancer walk, and and share with us. We're going to go back. Share with us, by the way, what happened on May 23rd, 2015, because your cancer walk, your survival, your resurrection, and how Connie, you said at that time, put flesh on Jesus.
Mm.
And that became central to you surviving and thriving today. Yes.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. I know you love that when interview guests do that. I was just like, yes.
I share that with you in
Both
confidence, and it
we
comes
both
back, John Tish.
folks, we're both interviewers, and so it's like, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. You come in with this great question, and somebody goes, "Yes, yeah," and then they take a glass of water, and I'm like, "What the heck just happened?"
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah. I was just having it was just a routine, a medical exam. I went into my doctor's office, and he did the exam and took my blood, and nothing was wrong with my blood. And when he did it was prostate cancer, and he did the other exam, the gloved hand exam, and he said, "Whoa, something's different here." And so something different ended up being a biopsy, and then a sonogram, and then you need emergency surgery. And so I had tumors and like I said, it didn't show up in my blood. I didn't have any symptoms or anything. And all of a sudden, here I am, and I have cancer in my lymph nodes. A tumor took my kidney out, and so Connie and I are just fighting my life. And she's a famous actor who still works, and
Yes.
grandmother of 3 kids. And so she dropped everything, and we just got smart. We dug into what's all the research, who are the best doctors, what anybody should be doing. And then we mixed it with faith. We mixed it with Mark 11:23, who and it's a longer story, of course, but Mark 11:23 is basically, whoever says to this mountain, "Be removed and be
Mm.
cast into the sea," and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will be done, shall have whatever he says. So therefore, whatever you ask when you pray, believe that you already receive it, and you
Yes.
will have it. And so I began to understand that when Jesus went to the cross, he not only took our sins, but he also took our griefs, sorrows, our sicknesses, and that the true
Mm.
nature of God was not to put sickness on anybody. That's nowhere in the
That's so
Bible,
good. That's right.
but it's health and wellness. And so that faith plus works plus
Mhm.
visualization was able to get me on the other side. And the doctor gave me 18 months to live, because the tumors were so aggressive and growing so quickly. And so, but I wouldn't have made it if it hadn't been certainly my faith, but you really do need an advocate, because when you're going through chemo and you're going through all these surgeries, and there's always, some sort of a contraindication or collateral damage with something this serious, is you don't have any energy. You're throwing up basically all the time. You don't
Yeah.
have energy to pray for yourself. So you need people around you. and that was Connie. And there are
Yeah.
times now, years later, where she's like, yeah, I saved you, but at what cost to the rest of my life? She never said that, but but we live in this world where
Yeah.
it's, I go back and I get checked
Yeah.
every 4 months, and sometimes I have to go back into treatment. But I can still see myself at the age of my Aunt Imogene, who's still alive at 98
Oh,
years old. So
wow.
it's just, as Paul said in the Bible, it's just a light affliction.
Yeah, light
But
affliction.
but if you treat it as anything else, because the devil is real, right?
Yes,
And if
yes.
you treat it, and there's going to be these thoughts, especially as we get older. We get lost in rumination sometimes, right? Where it's like
Yeah,
2 o'clock in the morning. It's like, oh my gosh, it's coming back, or whatever,
that's
whatever it
right.
happens to be.
Right.
By the way, yeah, as you know, it doesn't have to be sickness. It can be grief.
That's right.
Grief is just as powerful. It fills the vessel as completely as sickness and pain.
Something which resonates in your story and also in mine is the intense visualization, right? And I too, by the way, side note, has nothing to do with anything else other than I love Sergeant Fury, I love Spider-Man, and we could talk for hours about our comic
Sure,
book collections, but that's a
sure, yeah,
conversation for
yeah,
another
yeah.
time. But yeah, what you're saying resonates with me as in my faith walk, in my journey. How God, through Jesus Christ, my faith in Jesus Christ, has delivered me in so many situations, and visualization is so important as part of that because all you need, my friend, as you know, is faith the size of a mustard seed.
Right, yeah.
And you quoted the scripture well that in his heart a man determines his steps, but God determines the path. You know,
Yeah.
directs the path. With that said, and John Tesh, and by the way, for our listeners, John Tesh, an amazing individual, resurrected his life many times. A story that's told in his book Relentless, and more information is available at tesh.com, including about his music series and how that offsets dementia or certainly slows down the effects of the aging brain. Um, John, one of the things I don't want our listeners to get hung up on is not only is it just piano, but I read a cross sectional study that said that active choir singers above the age of 60 perform better in verbal flexibility compared to non-singers. So there's many positive effects of music, whether you're singing, certainly you're advocating piano playing, but music in general has an incredible effect on patients who are suffering dementia. Yes.
Yeah, and you'll notice that, and we saw this with Connie's mom, who had white matter disease, a form of dementia, Alzheimer's, and we noticed that, as she was losing her memory, she was still able to sing Frank Sinatra songs. So
Hmm.
it's a complete music is it's a completely different part of the brain, and I don't know that. I don't know the sciencey part of that. I just know that what you're talking about, it works. I mean, why is it that orchestral conductors live so long? I mean,
Hmm.
you look back at what music does for you. But we had this story recently that you just spoke. We had this story on our radio show recently about how how great it is to sing in a choir for a couple of reasons. And this is also why when parents ask me, what instrument should I get my child into, my grandchild, and I'm like, it could be guitar, it could be piano, it could be singing or whatever. But I really do recommend getting into something that the school systems are taking out of the schools now. So you might have to find some sort of a private group, which is play in a band or
Hmm.
sing in a choir,
Hmm.
play in an orchestra, because the whole process of, let's take singing, because you brought that up. The process of singing, first of all, especially for people our age, the socialization is amazing, because
Hmm.
you're working. It's like being on a PT boat or something. Everybody's got their own job. You got the altos, you got the basses, you got the sopranos, and everybody has to sing in rhythm. They have to follow. If there's a conductor, they have to follow the conductor, and then you have to blend.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
what makes an orchestra and also a choir sound so great is that it's the tuning is not perfect, right? So it
Yeah.
actually fattens it up. But the socialization of that, and then also your brain trying to tune your voice to where the pitch is.
Hmm.
It's I mean, it's so great for your brain. And even during COVID, we had this one friend, and she did an online choir where people she would teach people how to sing on a Zoom call every week, and then they would all sing a song together. I'm not sure how they did that technologically, but it worked out, you
Yeah.
know. And so it's and it being with like-minded people, it's so powerful. That's why people go to church, you know. So
Yeah.
we want that socialization, and we want to mix it with faith.
Well, when you talk about the benefits of music, those another. Well, first of all, it's 2 points. First, let me go back to the one with Tony Bennett, who succumbed to Alzheimer's. But in his last days, Tony Bennett, who the New York Times said was the crooner of the American songbook, released an album with Lady Gaga, and it won a Grammy. But John, here's the point: he could remember the music while other memories were fading him, which kind of underscores your point.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, you don't have to do it with piano. My son, who could play some piano, but he just decided he saw a ukulele on Amazon once, and he bought the ukulele, and then he took a course on YouTube, and now he plays the ukulele on stage with us. You know, Jimi Hendrix learned
Yes.
how to do that, and there's you know the crafting. We just did this story the other day when if you're learning to handwork, basically if you're knitting or
Mhm.
my grandkids do this, they have actually knitting courses
Mhm.
in their school, in their elementary school.
Yeah.
And anything where your brain is working on things differently, and the repetitive motion too, you know. That's why piano, that's why instruments. But again, the barrier to entry is, oh, I don't have a piano. Well, you can probably find a used keyboard on eBay,
Yeah.
or or use ukulele, or any of that stuff, and just Google choirs in my area,
Yeah. Yeah.
or even do it
Yeah.
at church. Yeah,
Yeah, multiple studies have shown that it improves cognitive function from childhood to even older age. Matter of fact, there was a study that talked about raising the IQ of children, which
yep,
persisted even into adulthood. But here's the strong point: regardless of socioeconomic background. Most people think you have to be wealthy or only the rich play instruments, but regardless of socioeconomic background, music was a leveler even into adulthood.
yeah. And I saw it in we put a small music program into my daughter's now just turned 30,
Hmm.
and in her elementary school there wasn't a music program, and it wasn't funded, and so we raised some money and put a program in there, and hired a teacher. And much like, if you've gotten to this part in the book, that my teacher in elementary school and junior high was Dr. Thomas Wagner.
Yes.
And he was one of those guys who was just like, "Come on, let's make." He would just hand you an instrument, Let's,
Yeah.
like, you want. Hey, here's a violin, here's a trumpet, here's a saxophone. Come on, let's make some mistakes, And he would walk around,
Yeah.
hold your fingers like this, and all of that. And so there are many studies, and since you're such a great researcher, you've probably seen this as well, about how much math there is in learning an instrument. And so when the
Yes.
schools are pulling, oh, we don't have money for that, we're going to concentrate on STEM,
Mhm. Mhm.
only, because but what you're doing is you're taking out part of the mathematical training, as well. And also there's discipline,
Mhm. The
there
discipline.
you don't get into you don't get, if you're in elementary school or in junior high and high school, if you're in the band, you won't make it unless you're disciplined. You'll learn discipline. I mean, for some of these bands, like the one I was in high school, it's like Navy SEAL training. You get stuff
Yeah.
thrown at you. You're crawling down, trying to get away from the conductor.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Whiplash. If
Yeah.
anybody's seen that movie, but but yeah. So that discipline. I couldn't go outside until I played my scales for it was like I was. It was like,
John.
and the timer is like, the egg timer that my mom put on my
Ah.
piano for 2 hours, like. And I tell the story on stage that, after, 18 years of that, it went anytime 60 Minutes would come on, I get the hives and have to run to the piano.
But but John, when you talk about the high school band aspects, that's what rescued you at Red Rocks. Not only your guys hanging together, and this is detailed and relentless, But you talk about how the string players fled when it starts pouring down rain, right? Because they have to protect their cellos, they got to protect their violins. But it was the brass that stuck with it, came back on stage. The
Yeah,
from
because we're
marching band in high school.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Because we're used to marching in the rain. You don't see
Right. Right.
you don't see a violin player marching in the rain. You know.
It just doesn't happen. Um, but John, when you talk about, and as we go to our close with John Tesh, and you know him from Entertainment Tonight, Grammy Award winning, just an incredible catalog of music, folks. Even big band music, John. You cover the spectrum from new age all the way to big band. You have some gospel in there. You've won numerous Grammy awards for it. So when you talk about this program of teaching people music to slow down dementia and improve cognitive function, you're coming from a place that's well researched by life and by practice and by what you've seen. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And also just we baby boomers, right?
Yeah.
We look back at not to demonize any other generation, but
Of
we
course.
look back on those, young whippersnappers, and we're like, we're ready to tell our story about walking through the snow to school, or, my parents didn't know where my school was. I had to
Right.
ride my bicycle, all the rest of that stuff. And I think it's coming around actually, because I know I could see Gen Z doing some of this stuff, and even Gen Alpha, where my grandkids are,
Mm-hmm.
is it's hard work is wonderful. When you
Yeah.
and nobody's coming to God will save us, but nobody else
Right.
on earth is coming to save us.
Right. 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 Right.
So the work ethic is so important. And I know you get this too, because it's you know no matter where you are in your life. And we talked about, we did a big survey of our Facebook group. We have a huge Facebook group and Facebook audience, and email and all the rest of this stuff.
Nearly 2 million followers, I think I read.
Yeah, and we sent out a thing saying, hey, if what's up with you? What are the top 3 things that are bothering you? What are your pain points? If John could teach you, something. And so a lot of stuff came back. That's where the piano thing came back. I wonder if you could teach me how to play piano. But also, people worried about their brain health, wanting to know how I protect that, because a lot of baby boomers, right? We've been through it with our parents, with our grandparents.
Yes.
Before
Yes.
that, seeing that. When we saw Bruce Willis
Yeah,
succumb to
that's right.
dementia, I
That's
mean,
right.
I used to go to a bar and he was the bartender. So all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, and it really
Yeah.
it really hits home.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where um it's encouragement to try other stuff. When you mentioned the big band thing, where did that come from? Because I'm not really known as a singer. I mean, I used to sing in the
Right.
choir at church.
Yeah.
We're on an airplane, and we're talking about with my band, right? And there's a bunch of us, and somebody starts doing a Frank Sinatra imitation. He goes, the summer wind comes blowing in across the sea. And my bass player says, John, we should do, our next album should be a big band album. And I go, well, who's going to sing? And he
Yeah.
goes, you. He goes, you can do it. And I'm like, what?
Oh,
And so he said, yeah, let's make the album release date for 6 months from now, and you learn the songs. And I'm like,
mm,
whoa. So I got a voice teacher. I studied everybody from Michael Bublé to Sinatra to
yes.
Bobby Caldwell to all
Yes.
of these guys, and I learned how to sing big band tunes. Because a lot for that, it's not, you're not a pop singer, right?
That's
The
right.
the, the range is, I'm a baritone. The range is like that, but
Yes.
6, 8, 10 months later, I'm on stage on another PBS special singing, when marimba rhythms start to play, dance with me, make me sway, and because I studied these guys,
Yeah.
the same way when I was a kid at 19 years old, I wanted to be a news reporter. And so I just got all these tapes from Walter Cronkite and Eric Severide and all these people, like Chuck Scarborough in New York. And I started emulating them. The problem with emulating with Walter Cronkite, anybody our age knows, is that you start going, well, my name is John Tesh, and
That's right.
tonight here's the news. So that didn't work out. But the thing of just being not being risk averse,
That's right. Right.
being risk active, and you
Yes.
did it when you retired, and all of a sudden you started this podcast, and now you got a card game, and you're like the voice for our generation now,
Yeah.
which
Thank
we
you.
appreciate.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's true.
But
It's
you, but
true, you know, and we have to lean into it.
lean
For so many
into it.
years,
That's
I
right.
leaned out of being a senior citizen. You know,
Yeah.
I'm coming in on 72, and I go to the gym, and I'm the oldest guy in the gym. And
Yeah.
I like, what? How the heck did that happen? How am I the oldest guy in the gym? You know, I tell these stories, you know, at soccer games, and people are like, you know, I don't know, pop up. I'm not sure if I believe that. What are you talking about? You know,
Yeah.
back in the day, we had, you know, blah blah blah. So we as baby boomers, we
Yeah.
as aging people, aging grades, you really need to lean in, you know,
Yes. That's
because
exactly right.
when you watch The Greatest Generation lean into the Normandy thing, you know,
Yes.
just recently, the
Extraordinary.
anniversary, you realize, oh my
Extraordinary.
gosh, look at this guy. He's 104 and he's telling us that we're messing up the country. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. We'll get busy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And we go back to your music career real quick as we go to our close. It doesn't get any better, folks, when John Tesh writes a song, and forgive me if I butcher it. Is it Conchetta? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So he composes Conchetta for the love of his life with Connie. And John, I mean, it doesn't get it. I can't even compete with that, brother. I don't know who can compete with that. And fireworks, on the beach. That's impressive as part of
Well,
your
what,
songwriting
yeah,
legacy.
what you're talking about is when I wanted to ask my wife. I knew my wife for 6 months, and but prior to getting married, and I wanted to. I knew this. I knew this was the one. And my wife, if you look it up, folks, Connie Selleck, a very famous actress, and just, I
Yes.
mean, just gorgeous. You know, if you've had a good look
Yes.
at me and a good look at her, if we say, you know, I out punted my coverage
Yeah.
for you guys out there. So anyway, I knew I wanted to ask her to marry me, and she's an Italian from the Bronx. I can never tell what she's thinking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes I can tell it's loud what she's thinking. You know? Sometimes
Yes.
I couldn't
Yeah.
think about this. I couldn't understand this. And so, so I rented a restaurant in Carmel, California for 2 hours. I wrote her a song called Conchetta. It's her real name is Conchetta Selecchia. And then I had a small string quartet playing that song for her, which she knew, in the restaurant as we moved in, as we walked in. And then at the end of the night, I had a small barge outside in the water in Monterey. I shoot up a 5-minute fireworks display. I wanted to make sure. I want to make sure she could say no like 5 days later, but I
Right.
wanted to get
Right.
a yes that night. And
Right.
so and I'm still paying for the insurance for shooting the fireworks off 32 years ago.
That is so good. And she says in the book Relentless, which you folks can get a copy of at Tesh.com. You can also buy it on Amazon as well, which is where I bought
Yeah.
mine. And it's a riveting read. But John, in there, you talk about how she says, "These fireworks are for me, folks. You're enjoying them, but these are for me."
Oh yeah, people were coming and they were running down to the beach, and she said, "No, no, these are mine."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a mess because the ceiling was low, it was a big cloud cover, and
Yeah.
so they were extra loud, and it set off all the car alarms on the pier. So I wasn't
Well,
really. That's me though. It's like, you know, okay, let's do a big concert. It
that's
rains.
right.
Let's do a marriage proposal. Okay, the car alarms go off. You know, it's just
Right.
that's part of
Right.
the whole package.
Well, John, you and I are kind of this doesn't compare, but I think our orientation to life is the same. My wife Guinevere, she said we need let's put a little fountain in out front where our flowers are. And so she comes back home. I've got rocks, I got boulders, I've got this waterfall twisting. She said, "Dale,
Nice.
I just wanted a little trickle, and you've
Yeah,
got this
yeah,
massive
that's good.
Hollywood
Yeah,
production in front of our house."
yeah.
But
I could,
that's
yeah,
how the mind works,
yeah.
right? When
I
you
can tell you
have such
why.
creativity.
Yeah, I can tell you why that happened. I know exactly why that happened. It's very simple. She's Guinevere, you're Lancelot, and
Ah.
that's what Lancelot does. Lancelot does. Lancelot slays the dragon for the girl, right? So
Oh, that's
I
so
just gave
good.
myself chills. Guinevere, what a beautiful name.
Thank you. We're celebrating. We're celebrating the 32 years anniversary. I'm going to play this clip for Guinevere so I can score points from the
That's right.
amazing John
Yeah, that's
Tesh.
right. Guinevere, it's always going to be it's always going to be a waterfall for you with this guy.
This gets better and better, buddy. Um, I'm trying to let this go, but there's another part of your book where you talk about Connie, who, by the way, at the risk of you hanging up, I had a major crush on her from Hollywood and from
Everybody did. Yeah.
Was it America's
Yeah.
Greatest Hero, I think?
Yep. The greatest American hero. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had this crush on her,
Me too. And
and I was envious of you.
that was the show where I fell in love with her. Yeah,
Yeah.
and people, and now the grandkids watch that show, you know, the 12-year-old and the 7-year-old,
Yeah.
they watch Greatest American Hero. Yeah, no, it's okay. I know what I've got. We keep the doors locked here. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But here's the kicker for that story, folks. Imagine this. John Tesh is in the hotel. He's preparing to be the keynote speaker at an IBM event. His buddies are going out. They invite you to a bar. You say, "No, guys, I got to get ready for the IBM for this gala." And you tell a story about going to the hotel a workout room, and you see Connie Selica on this bike. And I think you said Helen of Troy rides a bike. I think that's the chapter in your book. But the kicker of the story is here's John Tesh. We see him, this urbane presence on TV, very articulate, incredible presence. He jumps on his 6'6" frame on this pull-up bar. John, you failed miserably. You're hoping Connie doesn't see you, but as you slink out the door, she says, "John Tesh, is that you?" What a great story.
Yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, that you picked the best chapter. Yeah, I mean, again, guys know this thing where there's a high bar in every gym, right? And it happens to be the worst exercise, the hardest. You're lifting your body up off the ground. I don't know why I jumped up on the bar. We were the only two people in the gym. I jump up there and I'm hanging there. I realized that okay. So then I start like stretching, trying to send the message that this is what I do. This is the thing.
Right,
You
right.
know, I didn't jump up here to do a pull up. I'm stretching, right? And then I get on the sit up thing, the chair, the sit up bench, and it's like this, and my feet are so big they get locked up into the top
The curl.
rollers there,
Yeah.
and I can't get out. And so you know, so yeah, it's a yeah. And then there's I mean the rest of the story, which you have to read in the book because I'm like I can't do it here,
Powerful.
is that I stood her up. I panicked at the last minute,
Yeah.
and then I had to fight my way back in, which obviously you've read about. So we have an interesting history, and yeah, I'm sure everybody does in their relationship, but mine is goofier than most.
Well, I love how yours, yes, may be goofy, but warts and all. When you read this book, folks, Relentless, a memoir by John Tesh, you see warts and all on this amazing personality who's a prolific songwriter from Entertainment Tonight. What a pedigree. Going from also being homeless, sleeping in pub tents, getting kicked out of college. And yet, all of that, John, you continue to resurrect yourself despite the challenge of cancer to who you are today with your radio series and your podcast series and life hacks, which folks we also encourage you to subscribe to. Well done, John Tesh. What a pleasure speaking with you, sir.
Yeah, and to you, thank you for the encouragement, and I you know it's I appreciate it. It's great therapy for me, and you know you mentioned something about the book. That's one of the things that we can do as baby boomers, as older people in general, is I you know when I got the advance to do that book, I was like I can't you know I hired a ghostwriter and I was in you know where you'd have phone conversations and then he would write stuff and then he would approve it, and finally I just said after about 2 months I said I can't do that. I have to do this myself.
Hmm.
So I was supposed to turn the book in 6 months and ended up it being 2.5 years. But every word is mine now, and it would like you said, warts and all, and it was an incredible amount of therapy, and you can get the same therapy, and it's so good for your brain too.
Hmm.
Lots of evidence about this by journaling every day. You know,
Yeah.
we all have a life story that, and I had forgotten a lot of these things
Mm.
that, and you know, we write. Our brain has us writing a better version of our story, right, to protect
Yeah.
us. And so I
Yeah.
would call up people that I was with on the news in New York, like John Stossel and you know Meredith Vieira, these people who were my friends in the newsroom, and then other people. And I'd say, hey, what happened with this? Oh no, you didn't do that. You did this. You know, and you're like, oh
Oh.
my gosh, you know. And so when you go back and you and again, you know, you just get yourself a journal, Moleskine journal, whatever, and you start writing this stuff down, and you have to write by hand. And, you know, I wrote this
Mm.
book by hand
Mm.
because I knew the connection between you know with your you know for your brain, and it's what happens is you end up with gratefulness. You know that we've made it this far, that we've made it to our
Yes.
50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and sometimes the you know the rumination is happening. But if you just start and you said, okay, I'm going to write this, I'm going to start writing down. In fact, not going to write down what happened yesterday. I'm going to write down what happened in 1958, whatever. I want to go
Mm.
through that, and when you see it, it's such encouragement, you
Yeah.
know, that not everybody makes it this far. We have
Yeah.
lots of friends, right? And so your history, your story
Yeah.
is so powerful. And I would encourage you to do that.
Your history and your story is so powerful. I submit that that's how David slew Goliath,
Yeah,
because
oh
the
yeah,
word
yeah,
says that he had delivered the lion and the bear.
yeah.
So therefore,
Oh,
why would he not,
yes,
this
yeah.
Philistine
I
giant, why could he not slay
listen.
him?
I did that this morning. I
No
did that this
way.
morning because every morning we do a thing where Connie reads me a chapter in the Bible, and we're in First Corinthians now, and so we're doing something. There was something happening where there's some business stuff that was happening, whatever, and she goes, how are you feeling about this? And I said, you know what? He was with me with the bear. He was with me the lion. Whatever giants out there, he'll be with me. And we had just done that because
Oh,
it's such a great story in the Bible.
John, as we go to our conclusion, there's something I want to share with you, and also for our listeners from your book. It's a quote from Mel Gibson when he was doing the Passion of the Christ. And Gibson's recurring mantra on location, you said, was simply, I can do this. I know how to do this. But here's what you add to that. When you've jumped off a cliff hoping to fly, you must believe that God will help you build your plane or your wings on the way down. That's powerful, my friend.
Yeah, I can't believe you brought that up because I'd forgotten I even wrote that in the book. It's been years. Yeah, it's been 4 years, but that that Mel Gibson quote is so great because everybody was against him. Basically, he had to use his own money to then he wanted to do it in Aramaic, and there's movie studios like, are you crazy? No one's going to watch this film. And then there's like Jim Caviezel gets struck by lightning while he's on the cross, and it's raining, he's over budget and everything. And that was his mantra: was, I could do this. I know how to do this. I can do this. And then there's a Navy SEAL who I follow, and David Goggins, who he curses too much. I don't recommend watching it, but I'll tell you what he says. He says when he's running these 100-mile races, he
Yeah.
says, "This is what hard feels like. This is what hard feels like."
Mm,
And so it's
mm.
it's recognizing the challenge and then having the solution actually come out of your mouth. And I'll just say one more thing because otherwise I'll keep going forever. But Proverbs 18:21 saved me from the death that was prescribed by cancer and the doctors, and that is, um, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Because when
Mm.
I was diagnosed, I became a cancer patient. I started talking like a cancer patient. It was my cancer. It was this. I took ownership of it. And so we really need to be careful about what comes out of our mouth. And look what those two guys did, especially Mel Gibson. I can do this. I know how to do this.
Yeah.
And you can do that in anything that you're going after, that you're trying to accomplish.
For our listeners, what a pleasure. The John Tesh Piano Method is available at tesh.com. And also his book, Unleashing a Life, is called Relentless, Unleashing a Life of Purpose, Grit, and Faith. What a great interview, John, this has been. I'd be remiss in not thanking Chris for making this interview happen. I truly appreciate it, my friend. I look forward to our next point of contact. Have a great day, John Tesh.
You too.
Bye-bye.
God bless you. Thank you.
God
Bye-bye.
bless you. Bye. Please visit my website, awg55.com, to listen to past episodes of Aging with Grace 55 Plus, including purchasing a deck of 35 oversized playing cards for deeper, more meaningful conversations with the seniors in your life or community.